I'm going to play the comments from Brendan Carr because they're important, because a lot of people are going to be saying, well, this is just a business decision. It is a business decision because they didn't want the government to take away their ability to earn money. All right. But yeah,
right.
Here's
when you look at the conduct that has taken place by Jimmy Kimmel, it appears to be some of the sickest conduct possible. As you've indicated, there are avenues here for the FCC. So there are some ways in which I need to be a little bit careful, because we could be called ultimately to be a judge on some of these claims, as you indicated, one of the most significant, newsworthy public interest acts that we've seen in a long time. And what appears to be an action by Jimmy Kimmel to play into that narrative that this was somehow a MAGA or Republican motivated person. If that's what happened here with his conduct, that is really, really sick. And I've been very clear from the moment that I have become chairman of the FCC, I want to reinvigorate the public interest. And what people don't understand is that the broadcasters, and you've gotten this right, are entirely different than people that use other forms of communication. They have a license granted by us at the FCC, and that comes with it an obligation to operate in the public interest. And we can get into some ways that we've been trying to reinvigorate the public interest and some changes that we've seen. But frankly, when you see stuff like this, I mean, look, we can do this the easy way or the hard way. These companies can find ways to change conduct, to take action, frankly, on Kimmel, or there's going to be additional work for the FCC ahead.
Now, what does that mean?
I think what you said there strikes me as a very reasonable.
Sorry, I forgot what I was playing.
What does that mean?
Yeah. It's
either Disney can take care of this or we can take care of this.
Yeah, and the excuse here is the licensing and the public interest, which is like in the terms of the licensing. And the obvious question that people will ask here and should ask is, who determines what is in the public interest? That is a subjective ass term if I've ever heard one in my entire life. Okay, so who's going to get to determine what the public interest is? The Obama administration tried to go around to all the conservative talk show stations and say that they were not giving adequate airtime to opposing viewpoints and questioning whether or not they were talking about things that were in the public interest, like health and the environment and things that are actually, in the whole public's interest. And there was an uproar and they ended up dropping the whole thing. But that they were trying to determine what they thought was in the public interest. And the president...
It's going to be whoever the president is.
Yeah, the president gets to fire the people that are on the FCC board. There's 5 members of the FCC board. And by the way, I've always liked Brendan Carr. It's not, like typical to have like, oh yeah, that's my favorite FCC chair guy, But I've always liked Brendan Carr. We have talked about him before. You might not remember, but he was a member of the board previously. And he's the one that's always been pushing for the government to, like, when they're doing their broadband thing. It's the name of it's slipping my mind right now. When they spent all that money to bring broadband to everyone and haven't done it yet, but they're gonna. He was like, why don't we just use Starlink instead? Why don't we use SpaceX to do this? And in fact, they were going to use SpaceX to do this, and then they canceled that. Because they don't like Elon Musk is why they canceled that.
Not because it's for the public interest.
Not because of that. And so he's always been pushing to go this is clearly the best option for people, is to just send a freaking dish, Starlink dish to everyone's house. It'd be way cheaper if we're going to do this. It's way better to do this. And I was like, well, I kind of like that guy. That makes sense. I
do like what Magoo said here. What's funny? That the irony here, this is happening on a podcast.
Yeah.
Over the internet, this conversation is not being broadcast over the airwaves.
And the Benny Johnson show, that's happening on a podcast and on X. He streams on X, has an insane amount of people watching him every single day. This interview is what everyone is saying led to it was Nexstar deciding that they've got 30 affiliate stations or whatever. They're saying that they were going to pull Jimmy Kimmel. They call it preempting or whatever. They're going to change what it was supposed to play in that in that slot because ABC and Disney are sending them the content, and they are just the network, the affiliates that are doing this, and they say, well, they're sending us this, but we're going to put something else over it. At that time, this conversation on Benny Johnson's show, a podcast / X stream, led to Jimmy Kimmel getting indefinitely canceled or whatever. So that's pretty crazy too. Actually, Brendan Carr is going to make a little bit of point about this.
I think step that can be taken. I mean, obviously, look, there's calls for Kimmel to be fired. I think, you could certainly see a path forward for suspension over this. And again, the FCC is going to have remedies that we could look at. And again, we may ultimately be called to be a judge on that. But this also strikes me as sort of conduct that to some extent it shows some sort of desperate irrelevance. I mean, we're sort of exiting an era where the three main legacy broadcast networks could control and dictate the narrative to the American people. And one of the things that President Trump did when he ran for office, he ran directly at that legacy media establishment. And he smashed the facade that they get to control what we say, what we think, the narrative around events. And we're seeing a lot of consequences that are flowing from President Trump doing that. Their grip on the narrative is slipping. That doesn't mean that it's still not, important to hold them to the public interest standard. That's what we're going to have to do.
Now, he caught himself right there at the end because
he just said that.
He's making a really good point that these people are irrelevant. And it doesn't matter what they're doing. It's actually the podcast, streaming services, things like that. It's things coming over the internet that actually matter. That's what's driving public opinion. That's what people are listening to. The point that Magoo was making earlier.
But one of the things Trump ran on was making sure that these broadcast companies can't control the narrative. And that people could speak freely about what they want.
And he showed who actually controls the narrative, which are all of these services.
Yeah, but unless it's a narrative that the Trump administration doesn't like, then...
And then he goes, well, that doesn't mean that we shouldn't hold them, still to the public interest standard. That's, so he caught himself there a little bit.
I don't think most people understand actually the depth of how important it is that ABC, NBC, CBS have these gratuitous broadcast privileges granted to them by the American taxpayer.
Yeah, the right way to sort of explain this to people so they understand it is in the media landscape as relevant here, there's two main buckets of actors. One, you've got what we call national programmers. So that's what Comcast is, Comcast NBC. That's what Disney is, Disney ABC. They're the ones that effectively create and produce these shows. They then provide those shows to individually licensed TV stations. And those TV stations are in the main owned by independent companies, independent from Comcast and Disney. But Disney and Comcast both own some televisions themselves. So start from the idea that you have national programmers that create the show, including the Kimmel Show, and then they're given to and distributed over licensed TV stations. It's the licensed TV stations that have the public interest standard, including those TV stations that Comcast and Disney own. So FCC regulatory action focuses on those individual stations. And one thing that we're trying to do is to empower those local stations to serve their own communities. And the public interest means you can't be running a narrow partisan circus and still meeting your public interest obligations. It means you can't be engaging in a pattern of news distortion. We have a rule on the book that interprets a public interest standard that says news distortion is something that is prohibited. Likewise, we have a rule that addresses broadcast hoaxes. And so, again, over the years, the FCC has stepped back from enforcing it. And I don't think it's been to the benefit of anybody. Just look at the credibility.
I just have to say, I have no clue how if we're actually going to start taking actions on this, which they really haven't. Like, he's right about that. How the hell are we going to decide what news distortions are and broadcast hoaxes and stuff like that? Like this is after he said that the right was trying to do everything they can to show that the shooter wasn't one of them. He didn't even say that he was one of them or anything. He just said that that's what the people on the right were doing. Like, you guys think about all the stuff that we've talked about, even over the lifespan of this podcast right here, but that people on the news and all that have talked about when it comes to COVID and BLM and elections and vaccines and all kinds of, who the hell is going to determine public interest? You got to vote, 5-person panel going to vote on public interest. whether or not there's broadcast hoax / news distortion. So they got to be like really, really good, virtuous angels deciding whether or not they've accurately brought the news to everyone
in an oriented way.
Like it's just something that can't be done is what I'm saying. It's going to be done on a partisan basis. If they're going to start actually policing this and going after people, like the content of your news is just going to change drastically with each presidential administration like that. And not only that, they're going to strictly go after it, and they, could help determine who the next presidential administration is. Not that they haven't already tried. They clearly have all tried to do this. And we have to keep in the back of our minds that these people are largely irrelevant in the first place. I'm just, I'm not a fan of the action. If they are irrelevant, then why do it? Other than just like trying to show people that they can't be talking crap about you.
These legacy media, it's absolutely through the floor. They used to be able to say at least they were more trustworthy than Congress, but now they're even less trustworthy than Congress. And so I think as a business matter for them, something has to change. And at the FCC, we need to reinvigorate this. So again, there's actions that we can take on licensed broadcasters. And frankly, I think that it's really sort of past time that a lot of these licensed broadcasters themselves push back on Comcast and Disney and say, listen, we are going to preempt. We are not going to run Kimmel anymore until you straighten this out, because we licensed broadcaster are running the possibility of fines or license revocations from the FCC if we continue to run content that ends up being a pattern of news distortion. So I think, again, Disney needs to see some change here, but the individual licensed stations that are taking their content, it's time for them to step up and say, this, garbage, to the extent that that's what comes down the pipe in the future, isn't something that we think serves the needs of our local communities. But this sort of status quo is obviously not acceptable where we are.
You believe that what Jimmy Kimmel said rises to the level of news distortion?
Look, again, the FCC could be called upon to be an ultimate judge in that, but at this point, I think it's clear. It appears to be clear that you could make a strong argument that this is sort of an intentional effort to mislead the American people about a very core fundamental fact to a very important matter. At the end of the day, if we do get called upon to cast a vote on this, Disney will have a chance to put in their arguments and explain it. But this is a very, very serious issue right now for Disney.
I like how he so carefully chose his words there.
Yeah.
It would appear that this is something that could be taken as, not speaking correctly about facts in a very important matter, because I guess there's an administrative court where you can,
Disney can plead their case,
et cetera.
Although they won't probably have the presumption of innocence in the administrative court.
Right.
You've got to prove your innocence.
Convince the panel of 5 FCC judges.
The administration is correct until proven incorrect in an administrative court.